Up to now, we've been talking about planning and decision making, how to think about weather, how to interpret routing, and how to understand what the boat is actually going to feel like offshore. This video is about the tools that sit on top of that. Not to replace judgment, but to give you a bird's eye view of the outside worlds so you can stay oriented and catch problems offshore before they start. And honestly, that's basically your entire job as captain offshore. We're going to talk about AIS, alerts, safety features, and community tools. And this is one of my favorite subjects. Before we dive in, I want to set the tone clearly. None of these features we're about to talk about make you safe. What they do is give you information earlier, reduce cognitive load, and buy you time to make better decisions. Time is the real safety margin offshore. These tools are about awareness, not automation. Let's start with AIS. AIS stands for Automatic Identification System. At its core, it's a ship-to-ship and ship-to-shore broadcast system designed to let vessels know who's nearby and what they're doing. Traditionally, AIS has been a local line-of-sight tool. It works on VHF radio, on dedicated AIS frequencies just above the standard marine voice channels. In practice, that usually meant you could see maybe 30 or 40 miles, sometimes more with big ships and good antenna height. It's excellent for collision avoidance, but it's very reactive. Once something shows up on your onboard AIS, you're already dealing with it. For a long time, global AIS data did exist, but not for sailors. Satellite companies were collecting AIS from space and selling it to shipping companies and insurers and fleet managers and governments, and it kind of lived behind enterprise dashboards and big paywalls. Individual sailors simply didn't have access to it. But now that's changed. This is where over-the-horizon AIS comes in. Over-the-horizon AIS means AIS messages are collected by satellites, not your onboard VHF antenna. These satellites are in low Earth orbit and they receive AIS transmissions from ships all over the planet. That data is downloaded, aggregated, and turned into a global picture of vessel traffic. PredictWind licenses access to that satellite AIS data and integrates it directly into the same interface you're already using for weather and routing. So sailors can actually use it, rather than it living behind corporate paywalls. What used to be available only to shipping companies and fleet operators is now available to individual sailors offshore. One important clarification, this is not collision avoidance. This is a passive system. It's strategic awareness. Instead of asking who's near me right now, you can ask, what traffic am I going to see later? What am I going to see in a couple days? And that shift is huge offshore. This is where some people get confused, so let's clear it all up. The AIS data itself is global. What changes is how much of it makes sense to deliver and display. If you're on a desktop or a tablet with full internet connection like Wi-Fi, cellular, or Starlink, you can zoom way out and see all the global shipping patterns. Bandwidth isn't a constraint, so PredictWind doesn't need to be selective. And realistically, most offshore sailors are now running Starlink, so this kind of big picture awareness is becoming normal and very cool. But when you're offshore and the bandwidth matters, sending global AIS data constantly would be wasteful and overwhelming to the system. So PredictWind does something smart. When you're using the offshore app or a DataHub, the app tells PredictWind where your boat is. And then PredictWind sends you a filtered slice of the global AIS data set focused on what really matters for your next decisions. That slice is typically a few hundred nautical miles, not because the satellites can't see farther and not because AIS suddenly has a range limit, but because that's the right planning horizon for your limited bandwidth. It's far enough to see shipping lanes and anticipate interactions and adjust timing or avoid that traffic entirely. All of this without drowning you in noise or burning up all your bandwidth or making you wait for hours to get the data set. It's the same data, just smarter delivery.
It's also worth noting that if you are running a DataHub, that's that tool that we talked about in the first video, that AIS data doesn't stay trapped in the app. you can stream those contacts right into your Chartplotter. And that way you're seeing ships hundreds of miles away right alongside your local VHF traffic. And it's a very good way to integrate your navigation with AIS.
This is how I actually use this offshore. Not to stare at ships, but to understand patterns. I'll zoom out and I'll ask, am I crossing a major shipping lane? Is this going to be busy tonight? Can I adjust timing to cross during the daylight? This doesn't replace your onboard AIS. Your shipboard AIS is still doing what it's always done. That's short-range, real-time collision avoidance with alarms. And I'll say this plainly, I think every offshore boat needs a Type B AIS transceiver. That's essential gear. What PredictWind gives you is a heads up long before your onboard AIS can ever see the contact. It replaces surprise. Now let's talk about alerts. Alerts are most useful when they're set before you need them, not when you're tired, not when things are already happening. PredictWind lets you set alerts for wind thresholds, wave changes, forecast updates, and extreme weather. And alerts should be conservative and boring. I would much rather be nudged early for something that might matter than late for something that definitely does. The mechanics here are very intuitive, so instead of walking through every setting, I just want to focus on how to use alerts well offshore. Set them early and let them work quietly in the background. The community and local knowledge features are incredibly valuable if you use them correctly. This is experience sharing, not authority. It's great for anchoring notes and local quirks and pattern recognition and this surprised me moments. It's not a substitute for charts or official publication or your own judgment. Think of it as things other sailors noticed, not instructions. All of these features, AIS, alerts, and community have one thing in common. They reduce surprise. They help you notice changes earlier. They help you stay oriented when you're tired and avoid last-minute decisions. They don't sail the boat. They don't anchor the boat. They don't make weather decisions. You do. In the final video, we're going to talk about the offshore app itself, how PredictWind behaves when the bandwidth is limited, what matters offshore, and what you can safely ignore. Because offshore, clarity matters more than features. These tools don't replace seamanship. They support it. Used thoughtfully, they make offshore sailing calmer, more predictable, and far less reactive. I'll see you in the next video.